let's dive in. So today, we're going to talk about AI and fundraising, and we're talking about putting it into practice in 2024. And, I've been reflecting a lot as the year starts around what is really going to shape fundraising, plan giving, where FreeWill specializes, major giving across the board over the next year and 2 years. And I think it's still the three things that we talked about at the end of last year. In no particular order, these things are: number one, the great wealth transfer, which is the enormous sum of money that's already starting to shift from baby boomers as they age, right? Our oldest baby boomers are turning 78 years old this year, which means they are passing away in some cases, leaving a lot of money to charity, and also leaving a lot of money to their kids, who happen to be millennials for the most part. And so millennial wealth is going up while bequests are becoming super important, right? So that's one. The second thing is around the rise of donor advised funds. I saw a report, I think yesterday, 2 days ago, that Vanguard Charitable, which is one of the donor advised funds, saw about a 20+% spike this year in gifts over last year. Now, remember, $55 billion was granted last year. So if other organizations, other custodians hold true for DAFs, then you're looking at $65 or $70 billion granted last year in 2023, which means even more this year. So that's a huge second trend. And then third is what we're going to talk about today, like the rise of AI. And I think the 2024 theme is the normalization of AI, right? That it becomes, it used to be that email was this crazy new thing and cutting edge organizations were doing email fundraising, and now it's table stakes. And it's not that AI is going to be totally table stakes in 2024, but by 2025 it is. And 2024 is a transition year. So just summarizing those three things, great wealth transfer, donor advised funds, the rise of AI is really the big things that we're going to get our heads around in order to be super successful this year and in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's what we're here for. That's why we put so much effort into this. A couple other things we're putting a lot of effort into. We'll talk about over the course of it. But one thing I'm going to say now and then note at the end is that after the session, we're going to send you a special additional survey that's going to go into our donor advised fund report that's coming out soon. So we're doing a lot of research on that. So take a look for both of those. So thank you so much for being here. We're so glad to have you here. We're so glad to have folks really pushing forward their careers, their organization. This is one of the things that a couple of smart folks at any level in an organization can really bring into the nonprofit and push the whole entity forward. Super excited about this. Couple quick housekeeping notes. As usual, this is approved for 1.0 CFRE credits. What's going to happen is at the end of the session, we're going to put a survey in the chat. My colleague Phoebe, who's here and deserves a ton of credit for this session, is going to put a note in the chat at the end. Thank you in advance, Phoebe. And that will help you certify your participation. We don't send you like a certificate. Sometimes people say, give me the proof. Basically, you keep your own records. And then if you ever get audited, we back you up, right? So that's how it works logistically. Thank you for dealing with that. Here's the agenda for today. We'll do some very quick intros as usual. We'll talk about some of the exciting developments and AI tools to try. Some of them are outside fundraising, meaning just sort of beyond, but we want to get you used to using these things. We're talking about the difference in 2024 versus 2023. We're talking about putting it into action at your organization, right? So the goal here is not just like, hey, what is AI? We think that 2023 was AI's shiny object. 2024 is really putting it to use. 2025 is everyone's using it already, right? And so we don't want to get caught behind here. All right, so let's do some intros. My name is Patrick. This is what I look like with much more of a beard next to my wonderful good friend and co-founder, Jenny. So we might have to update that photo. Also, just a big hello on behalf of the whole FreeWill team, closing in on $10 billion raised for charity, closing in on 1,500 nonprofit partners, and more than 4 centuries combined of fundraising experience. So glad to have you here. And that's it. Well, actually, as a note of how glad we are to have you here, one of the things that we do on the sessions, if this is your first one, if not, it'll be more familiar to you, is we like to give away books to people who come because we're so grateful you're here. We know you have a lot of other places to be, and we really want to make sure that we can carve out the space to learn stuff together, right? So this whole session is learning stuff together. It's not a thinly veiled sales pitch like a lot of these types of things are. And so one way to say thank you is we're sending one of my favorite books as you can tell, many favorite books, but one of my favorite books is called Think Again by Adam Grant. So I'll send it to 20 people. At the end of the session, again, don't type in your address now. We're not going to look at it. We will put a survey in the chat, and that will give you a chance to win it. You put your name and where to send it to, and that will be that. The reason we're giving away Think Again, and the reason it's one of my favorite books, is if you look back at the last 20 years of your life, of your career, of technology, it's easy to see how much has changed in 20 years. And it's hard for us to imagine the world is going to change that much again, right? And so what we like to do is be ready for things to be regularly different in a way that that allows us to sort of continually remake our mental models, which is a hard thing because we've gotten used to some things, and we've adapted to so much change in the past. It always feels like, oh, well, can we just take a break for a little bit and settle in? But just to give you an idea, 20 years ago, there were no iPhones, right? Even mobile phones were still sort of like those annoying things where you had to type 3 times to hit the letter C, right? It's just that there's no Uber, there was no Lyft, there was no Airbnb. 20 years ago, we actually just hit the 20-year anniversary of Facebook, but there was no Instagram, there was no TikTok, right? Social media was sort of at its dawn. And so as we look forward, remember that not only is change continuing to happen, it's actually accelerating. So the next 10 years might see more change than the last 20, and that's sort of wild across the board. So a couple more things. When we ask you how your week is going, generally people are pretty happy, pretty pumped right now, which is really, really good. How confident we are about hitting our goals, a little bit down from last week, not too much. So good to see that strong end of year made folks pretty exciting. And then, one of the really important trends to see here is we asked you, do you already use AI in some form of your work? And it's February 2024, and 50% of you use AI already in some way in your work. 50% is a ton. Also, in October, it was only 40%. In last July, it was only 31%. Last March, it was only 11%. So we have spent less than a year tracking this, and we have basically quintupled the number of people who are using AI in their work in 11 months, right? This is wild and doesn't happen with other technologies. And so it's a really good time. If you're in that 50%, good chance to go deeper. If you're not, you can see that, ooh, look at this trend. By summer, it's going to be a clear majority of people using it, and we don't want to get left behind there, right? So we want to make sure we understand it, are comfortable, are confident, know how to use it to be more efficient in our work and more effective. We'll talk more about that in a moment. We ask folks if they use it in their personal life, and already we're at 60%, right? So you can guess in 2 months we'll be at 2/3 of people have used GPT or AI in some other format in their personal life, which is pretty wild. So that's great. I mean, just to give you sort of a random example, in terms of like personal life AI usage, last week, so many of you came to last week's webinar on Charity Navigator, which was the first webinar that I haven't done personally. And my colleague Lauren Winter Hansen did it. I hope you all enjoyed it. It sounds like it went super well. It's really, it's always a little scary when someone else takes the reins for the first time. But Sherry Lynn says it was awesome, which is a huge, we love Lauren, but it's a huge relief, to be honest. And it's because I was hiking in Chilean Patagonia for 2 weeks. I was totally off the grid for about 10 of those days. It was so delightful. If you've never been to Patagonia, it is just unbelievable. It's a little bit strenuous, but we saw hikers as old as 65 or 70 really doing it, folks as young as 16, 17, and it was great to just sort of put a backpack on and walk for 9 or 10 days. That's not the point. The point is that, when we landed in Santiago, I was with my friend Nick, and we were at a coffee shop, and we're just hanging out, but we've talked for 9 days. We've had no computers. There's a lot. We're running out of things to talk about. And there's a set of dominoes at the coffee shop. And neither of us have ever played dominoes. It's a pretty big game in Miami, so I'm sort of embarrassed to say that. But, bigger game in Latin America than where I grew up. And, with it, we basically spent our own time, 5 minutes on each of our phones, learning all the rules for dominoes from GPT, learning all the strategy. And 10 minutes later, we were playing what I think of as like moderately high-level dominoes immediately. And it was super fun. People love dominoes. Honestly, I would go play it. We had to go check out of our hotel, but otherwise we might still be there playing it. It was so much fun. And it was just a sort of fascinating experience for both of us to realize, like, oh, this is a great great use of things. Also, it helped me with packing lists to go to Patagonia. It helped me with, what other folks say is the hardest part of it. What's the easiest part? When should I really gear up? When should I be extra careful to not get hurt? Super helpful. All right, aside over. Let's talk about how much AI has shifted even since the last time we chatted about this. One of the coolest things, many of you don't read Braille. Most of you don't read Braille, I assume. But now there's a robotic sensor that incorporates AI to read Braille at 2x the speed of human readers, right? So that folks can just use it when they see Braille instead of having to sort of use their fingers and go slower. Big advantage, right? That translates to voice. Microsoft, you can see Microsoft is still one of the largest companies in the world. It sort of doesn't get as much media as maybe it should. It's really reinventing itself as an AI company, investing billions. Many of you would have seen several AI commercials in the Super Bowl if you watched the Super Bowl. Congratulations to our Kansas City fans, by the way. The Biden-Harris administration announced the creation of the U.S. AI Safety Institute Consortium with an unpronounceable acronym. But congratulations to the administration for doing that. And then every tool that you're seeing that you're using is actually getting better and faster as we speak. So those of you that used ChatGPT in March realize how much quicker it is now than it was 11 months ago, how much better the outcomes are, how that's improving as well. That's great. Couple other tools that I personally love. This has not a lot to do with fundraising, but just as you're trying to explore these things, there's something called HeyGen, which is heygen.com. Again, we have no relationship or anything with these folks. You can record a video like this in one language, and it will reproduce it in Italian or Mandarin or Arabic, and not just the voice changing, but it will sound like your voice, and it will move your lips, your teeth, your mouth in a way that really looks like you're speaking that language, and it really hears and sounds like you're speaking that language, which is sort of really pretty interesting. They obviously have a lot of security to make sure it's you. You have to upload documents, a bunch of other things, but it's pretty wild. And again, these things are just getting started. I was talking to my friend Brian Peterson, who works at Human Rights Watch. I don't know if Brian, you're on the call about this, but Brian and I were talking about this tool called Suno.ai. What is Suno? Suno is a delightfully fun tool that can make a song, including lyrics, right? So it writes lyrics and all the background music about anything. So if you say, I want a 90s grunge song about planned giving fundraising, or I want an 80s hip hop beat that is clean to play for my child about his day, and here's some facts about his day, right? It can do that in about 30 seconds, and it's really, really fun. It's a little bit more of a party trick than something that's like highly usable right now. But yes, you could write a song about playing dominoes. I feel like also the 90s grunge around planned giving hits a real nerve with a bunch of us, so I appreciate you. DALL-E is outstanding image generation, also free for the most part. And all the images, as you can probably tell on the right here, are all AI generated, right? So if you want a fox reading a newspaper, maybe this is a dog reading a newspaper. If you want some other things, pretty awesome photo generation generally. Aisha says, anything for AI ASL translation? I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it exists, right? And if not, it will exist in the next few months. Good questions. Other things we're seeing, I think this is one of the most important pieces of research that happened recently. We talked about it in previous sessions, but I want to reiterate it because I think it expands uses of AI that most people don't think about. So Wharton, which is the business school at the University of Pennsylvania, typically thought of as a top 2 or 3 business school. The kids at Wharton will tell you it's the best, but that's up for debate. They conducted a survey comparing 200 business ideas generated by MBA students against ChatGPT-4, right? So this is a highly, highly selective school. These kids are very well trained. Many of them come from business backgrounds of their own. They're not really kids. They're all in their mid to late 20s to early 30s. So apologies to the Wharton students. And they've just had a contest to come up with good business ideas, which is something you do in business school all the time. And in this case, the contest was generate some ideas for new products or services appealing to college students that could be made available for $50 or less. Now, the results here were maybe not surprising because we're doing an AI webinar, but generally they were surprising to lots of people, including these highly accomplished business school students who justifiably think a lot of themselves. And so GPT came up with 200 ideas in less than an hour with minimal supervision. No one's really surprised that GPT is faster. But when they put them to a test, right, they surveyed a whole bunch of college students and said, which of these do you want to buy? respondents were more likely to buy products generated by ChatGPT than those by MBA students, right? So actually you have this ideation, this creative ideation that is being done better and obviously faster and obviously cheaper, right, by GPT than by business students, right? Presuming that in a different world, you'd be paying the business students. So that's just a little bit on how it's shifting. We're going to talk more about some of the AI tools to try for you. We're going to talk a lot more about putting into practice. So GPT, I sort of hesitate to even go over this again, but for 50% of you still haven't used this at all. So we'll start here. ChatGPT is really the thing that sort of kicked off the AI frenzy, the chatbot that they released in about November of 2022. There is a free version. There is a $20 a month paid version. It is an excellent brainstorming tool. It is getting a lot faster. It can answer questions related to any topic. I'm babysitting my 5- and 7-year-old niece and nephew. I need a nutritious plan. What should I cook them for lunch? What should I make them for lunch for a week? It can write poems. It can write limericks. It can write song lyrics. It doesn't write music. It can give you a whole bunch of various ideas. We'll talk more about that in a moment. It has some limitations in that it costs money, right? So we all prefer things that are free to cost money. It requires some specific prompts. It's not as hard as people make it sound. And it can give the wrong answers. So specifically with things that are factual, we want to make sure we're fact checking it, right? There was a famous issue recently where a lawyer submitted a whole brief written by GPT, and it sounded like a great brief, but all the citations were not real, right? So it is not the case that you can sort of take every bit of history as gospel, but if you do some fact checking, it's a great start. Image FX is a new release from Google, along with Gemini, that some folks are chatting about. High quality image creator. It's free to use. It's web-based. It gives you 4 images per prompt. Limitations, it doesn't completely generate photorealistic images, which honestly can be a plus in some cases. And it struggles with photos that feature letters and humans. It's really interesting, right? So you could say, have a big smiling family holding a welcome home sign, and everything will be totally perfect, but welcome and home will be misspelled, or the letters won't sort of be formed. So it's a lot of these things are still working on forming letters, which is pretty interesting. We also want to talk a little bit about some of the tools that we built for you. These are, again, all super free. AI Willie and Sophie. A third of you have already used these. So wildly, half of you have used any AI in your work, and basically 6 out of 10 people who have used some AI in their work have used Willie or Sophie. So we'll talk about those very briefly. These are tools that are specifically designed to help nonprofit fundraisers sort of bowl with bumpers, right? Make it super easy to use AI in a way that's really helpful to you. We made it in July of 2023. We keep updating it. And it writes a lot of different types of content. It's been used by thousands of nonprofits. It's built on GPT-4, so it's actually the best version of GPT, but it's totally free for nonprofits. How is it free? It's because we cover the costs. It's not that much cost. And so what we've done is basically combined all the best uses of AI, but then also a lot of structure around it that you don't have to enter every time to put all the research-backed best practices there. And so it really delivers outstanding content. It's not always perfect, but honestly, it's like better than most of us at writing, and a really good first draft for those of you that are the best writers. What does it do? Super high quality fundraising emails for annual appeals, personalized direct mail copy, great thank you notes, both either in mass or individually, social media posts, social media calendars. It can put out your whole email calendar for a year. Press releases. A lot of people hate writing press releases. You don't do it that often, and so it's sort of hard to pull it together. It can even say, it can even create some sample quotes for your key players. It can evaluate your existing fundraising emails. It can craft your own permanent giving guide, which is a really handy, we think it's one of the most important pieces of content in modern fundraising. It's underutilized. But it basically helps walk donors through the various types of non-cash giving that they can give to have a lot bigger impact at a lot lower cost. If you're not using some version of a permanent giving guide, you should definitely be doing it this year. Yeah, there's some sort of very advanced versions of this that are available for our FreeWill partners. And for non-partners, there's a version of this as well in Willie. Just please do that. If you think about the rise of donor advised funds and non-cash gifts, it ends up being really, really important. Um, and then also you can create your most compelling tax, like smart giving message in times for tax season. So if you have gift officers who might be really personable, but not necessarily financially savvy, and you want them to talk to a donor about giving stock, it's a great way to give them talking points in a way that you don't have to do it. All right. Also, Sophie is very similar, but we built Sophie. My colleague Chris Hall really led on this. Chris is amazing. And it specifically has a bunch of other use cases for faith-based organizations and houses of worship. So it's also built on GPT-4. It's all free, et cetera. But it runs the gamut of every Christian denomination, the main branches of Judaism. We're building out some of the other sort of major American religions in particular to get us started. And so people love this, right? It can give you things like announcements at the synagogue or at the church, inserts for the bulletin, for those of you that would have bulletins, ideas for sermons, ideas for Bible questions. I've actually seen some recent research, or at least anecdotal information, that a lot of priests, ministers, rabbis are using raising GPT for sermon ideas or to write the whole sermon, which is really interesting, when appropriate. So that's interesting. Drew says, is Willie free to use? Yes, it is free to use. High holiday appeals when relevant, newsletter articles, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty cool. Go check that out. All right. So those are some of the tools that you can use. Let's talk about why 2024 is different, right? So stepping back, why are we using AI at all, right? Well, particularly in nonprofit fundraising, it's a really good use case for AI. It is, folks like you tell us all the time that we're understaffed, we're undertrained, we're overworked, and really all of you should have 3 assistants and you don't have them for the most part. And a lot of this work is written communication, which is honestly the first real frontier where AI is surpassing human capabilities, certainly in speed, but often in quality. And the research that we've seen at MIT shows that AI increases productivity and quality of work. What does that mean? It means the outcome is better. It means the outcome is faster. And the people using it are happier than when they're not using GPT, right? So it's a really important thing for folks that are stressed and understaffed. And it's a really good avenue to make your job a lot easier. By the way, here's the sort of more academic demonstration of the MIT research, but you can basically see, everyone's sort of happy in terms of, everyone's spending the same amount of time, the group spends the same amount of time on a task when they both are treated the same. And then one group gets a little bit faster when they do it a second time, and the other group gets way faster when they do it a second time and use AI, right? In terms of when we have other people grade that work, all the groups that are identical are about the same as you might guess. And post-treatment, meaning the second one, actually people grade it down a little bit, and the grades go much higher for folks that use AI, right? So better output in faster time, which is great. But do we want to just turn into automatons? No, in fact, the research shows that the folks in the treatment group, which is just a fancy way of saying the folks that used AI versus didn't, found themselves to be much more satisfied in their work than the others, which is pretty awesome, right? Who doesn't want to be better at their job, do it all faster, gives you more free time and happier while doing it. Oh, Barbara says, are we limiting ourselves by thinking about only AI for writing? Which is a great question. And Sebastian has a question. It says, what happens with the data or prompts that go into Willie? Which is also a great question. So we're going to answer both of these questions in a moment. But first, it is a new year, right? So coming back to this, what does 2024 mean? Well, 2023 was this sort of fun thing where AI was cool. We were all figuring out what to do with it. We were dipping our toes. I don't know if you all remember sort of the dawn of the internet, right? Many of you would have been around in the late 90s and working. And we were like, this is awesome. What do we do with it? And early on in internet life, we were all just Googling, or not even Googling. We were using search engines that were not Google to find the lyrics of songs that we thought we knew and we didn't know, right? And song lyrics in like the first year of the internet were like the #1 search thing, along with some adult themes that we're not going to talk about. And so and then everyone sort of started to figure out, okay, well, now we can do all these like really cool things with the internet, and song lyrics sort of drifted down the list in terms of what we do. right? Ask Jeeves, Netscape Navigator, all these things, right? And 2024 is really our year of transition from, wow, I wrote a really cool limerick, that's crazy, to now we're making our work much more efficient and effective and figuring out how it can be used in our day-to-day. And what we're seeing here is the most efficient fundraising teams will be using AI to meet their goals. And then also we're starting to see this, this trend of major donors asking nonprofits to use AI more, to be more efficient, because all of them want the maximum impact for their dollar. We even hear things like some donors saying, I'm not going to give to charities that aren't using some form of AI because definitionally they're not being as effective as they could, right? And so now we have to do all this thoughtfully, but it's really a good avenue to have more impact for less money in a pretty exciting way. So we already mentioned this, we're seeing huge rises in terms of folks using it, which is great news. Here's my prediction. By the end of 2024, when we run this survey, 90% of people in a meeting like this will be using AI at least weekly, and at least half of you will be using it daily, right? So this is really what's going to happen, in the same way that if you looked at a cell phone in 1996, you thought, who's ever going to need that? And then, years later, you'd be using it, not just daily and not even hourly, but, minute to minute, which probably a separate problem. All right, so let's talk a little bit about hopes for AI, and then we'll talk about putting it into practice. When we asked you what you hope 2024 brings in terms of AI, biggest thing we saw was efficiency and streamlining work, to be expected. We saw innovation and creativity. We saw mass personalization. I think this is a really interesting trend, right? What if you could treat every donor like a major donor? That's really how this is going to drift. When people say things like, we talk about efficiency, they mean a tool to streamline work. For many of you, you're a one-person shop, or you're a three-person shop, or maybe you're in a bigger organization, but you're the only person running plan giving or the only person running peer-to-peer fundraising. These folks say it's helping to speed up my work and better meet deadlines. A lot of people say it can easily integrate into daily projects. It makes writing content so much faster. Other things people say is, when I have a writer's block, it's a great starting place. Other people say it would be awesome if AI could be a kind of formal assistant to me in my plan giving work, knowing that my employer doesn't have the budget to pay for a human being in that role, right? So that's exciting. On mass personalization, people say things like, all donors, regardless of amount giving, regardless of longevity, they want some level of engagement. They want trust. They want information on their impact. So we can really say, you made this gift in September of 2013. You also said this. We know you care about this. Here's the impact we had. It also can work with those who don't want more intense engagement. It can still be highly personalized, et cetera. So let's talk about putting this into action. And first, we're going to talk about an internal policy document for AI usage, right? So many of you have been asking this. Our view, and I'm going to say this, and most people aren't going to listen, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that you do not need a formal internal use policy to start using AI. You do not need this. You did not use one for email. You did not use one for fax machines. You did not use it for search engines. You did not use it for Google Drive or Excel or other places where tools you're using a lot. And yet some of you still want one. And so we made it for you anyway. For larger organizations, you'll probably come up with these over time. So we made a whole template. We think it's very good. You're obviously welcome to change it as much as you like. We will send this to you after the fact if you fill out the survey. That's how we know how to send it to you. So I'm going to walk you through this. I'm going to sort of both read it for the most part and talk about the why behind each of it, right? So we're naming it, right? It's the Red Cross internal usage statement. It's the, Gettysburg College, whatever it may be. Effective date, whatever the day is. This part's easy. Introductions. The AI document outlines the principles and guidelines for effective, ethical, secure, and responsible use of artificial intelligence technologies by us, right? We recognize that it's actually a very important part. We recognize we have simultaneous obligations to, one, use technology to maximize our impact and effectiveness towards our mission, and two, respect the rights and dignities of all individuals. So we actually want to hold both of these things in tension. We're not only protecting downsides, although obviously that's very important. We have a responsibility as an industry to make sure that we're maximizing the impact that we can have. Two, ethical principles for AI use. We commit to using AI in a way that is fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory. Our applications will prioritize the welfare and rights of individuals, ensuring that decisions are made with consideration for impacts on society. Great. Data privacy and protection. We will collect and use data responsibly, ensuring informed consent is obtained. Data will be stored securely, as you might imagine, with access controlled. We will comply with relevant data protection laws and do all the things that we do anyway, right? So that's important. This is an important part, and I'm going to caveat this in a minute. We will not upload personal, private, or sensitive data to train external AI models without express consent from affected parties. What does that mean? We're going to talk about this in a moment. It is a mistake to think that the data that you input in GPT or something like Willy is used to train models. That is explicitly against their terms of service. It is not the way it works, right? In the same way that you can put sensitive data in an Excel sheet in Microsoft, right? If it's in the cloud, it doesn't sort of like take that information and pull it back in to train other models on it, right? So that data is secure. What we don't want is uploading data in a way that's training external models or even internal models that will be used in sort of various ways that might be exposed externally. Okay, 4, AI system transparency. We'll be open about our use for AI systems. When AI is used in decision-making, we'll make sure we'll be clear about the process involved and make sure those can be understood. We will also take the following steps in AI-produced content, which is the most important thing for the folks on this call, right? All text written with the help of AI will be reviewed by a human before it is made public. When this is not possible, it will be clearly labeled as created by AI without review by a human or something similar, right? Any photorealistic image or video created primarily by AI is clearly labeled as such, and any person or persons in said images or videos have given permission for such usage. What does that mean? It means that you can't make a video of me and then send it out to all your donors and say, Patrick said do this, without me either giving super explicit, mostly giving super explicit permission to do so, or having the ability to refuse, right? So we'll do that as well. Why do we say photorealistic? If you see a fox typing and reading a newspaper, or is it a corgi or a corgi? Corgi? I don't know. Someone typed in the chat. One of those dogs, corgi with a hard G. Someone help me out here. Corgi? Thank you. So if it's a corgi, thanks everybody. If it's a corgi reading a newspaper, people aren't going to be like, oh, that's clearly a real image, right? So you're relatively safe there. I think we treat our supporters like they have a brain. But generally, if it's anything photorealistic, we make sure we label it as such. Okay, accountability and governance, right? Responsibility for AI governance within the organization lies with this team. This includes overseeing AI use and ensuring policy compliance, system securities. This is only if you're developing AI models internally. 99% of you will not be doing this, so please don't worry about this. But robust security measures will protect our AI systems from unauthorized access or data breaches. Regular security assessments will be conducted to identify and mitigate potential risks. Compliance with laws and regulations. Our AI will comply with all applicable local and international laws. You should be doing this anyway, right? We're not trying to break the law over here. Last few things. Employee training and awareness. Employees will be provided with training to understand AI technologies, ethical considerations, best practices. This will foster a culture of responsible AI use within the organization. Monitoring evaluation. We will continuously monitor the performance of our AI systems, assessing their impact on our operations and communities we serve. Evaluations will inform improvements, et cetera, et cetera. And then 10, we'll review this at least biannually, or you may want to set a more regular or less regular cadence, right? So, and then also if you have any questions about, the policy, contact this person here, right? So there's your sample policy if you need one. And sort of how you can think about this internally. At the end of the session, we'll send you a template so you can sort of copy and paste this and put it into work. Pretty simple. So you will all get that. We'll just fill out the survey at the end. Thank you so much. All right, so a couple of other additional notes, right? AI is not a big secret from your donors. Most of your donors want you to be using better technology to be more efficient. So donors may naturally be curious about whether your organization is using AI, how you're choosing to use it, and you can share your AI use policy with them to assure folks that people are using AI ethically. It will also instill confidence in donors, and it's an opportunity to affirm trust and legitimacy. So having one of these can be really helpful. And many donors, especially major donors that we've seen, are thrilled when nonprofits are using AI to be more efficient, right? They're seeing the for-profit world shift over there, and you don't want to be in this place where they think, oh, the nonprofit world is so much less efficient, even though we're not, right? And so oftentimes, nonprofits are actually much more efficient than many for-profit companies, but there's sort of, sometimes a bad name there, especially among major donors who might have made a lot of money in business. And so showing efficiency and innovation there can be quite useful. If you want to notify supporters that you're using AI, or if you're using some of that AI-generated content that's not reviewed by a human, right? In this case, this would be something that is reviewed by a human. You can say, please note, Happy Paws Animal Rescue sometimes uses artificial intelligence alongside human expertise in content generation to be maximally efficient and make the most impact at the lowest cost, right? And no one's going to read this and think, oh my gosh, why aren't you toiling over writing every thank you note? And, when you're saving money and being more effective and efficient. So just naming that there. Sometimes, another note, I just want to be extra clear about this. Sometimes nonprofits are worried about putting donors' names or similar info in GPT or Willy because they're afraid the model will train on this data. This is not something you should be worried about. It is a misunderstanding of how the tools work, right? The tools are not training on inputs. They're training on a whole bunch of existing text and other things they've already put into the model. So do not stress about this, in the same way that you would use Gmail to send it, say, have you checked in with John Smith, from one person to another, and that information is not being sort of sucked and then given out somewhere else. So just note that, just to reiterate this, it's a common concern we hear, and it's actually people just misunderstanding how the tools work. Thank you for that. All right, so let's talk about putting AI into action to hit your goals. And someone, I'm sorry if I've forgotten who, said earlier, are we being too small thinking about AI just as a content generation tool? And the answer is yes. Yes, it did, right? So content is a great use of tools of AI. When we're saying we've got to write a thank you note, a fundraising email, a social media post, these are all great uses. We'll talk more about content specifically in a moment, but it's limiting this. It's limiting to think only that. Second is idea generation, right? Remember the study of the Wharton students who were not as efficient at producing great ideas as GPT. And so, do you want themes for your gala? Maybe you did, New Orleans last year and or Mardi Gras last year and something the year before. Do you want 10 more ideas? Do you want ideas for icebreakers at your team meetings? Or do you want new types of campaigns to run? You might say, hey, we're an organization that's, raised $500,000 a year for the last 5 years. We're trying to break out. What are some ideas for really amping up our fundraising, right? And so idea generation that way. 3, strategy, right? So when we think about, here's our current team. If we're able to add 2 more headcount, where do you think what are some ideas for where we might add that headcount? Or how do you think we might structure our entire campaign plan over the course of the year, right? These are really, really, really good avenues. So check that out. And then lastly, I think this is one of the ones that's super underused, but it's sort of what I was telling you about the dominoes example, right? It's you have folks on your team who are very advanced and very unadvanced on everything, right? So maybe you have an expert, who's been doing it 50 years, great at talking to donors, great at all of the non-cash giving stuff, doesn't feel comfortable using Zoom, right? And so you can set them up with this and sort of help sort of give them the 10 pointers in a minute, right? And you're producing that content, or they're producing that content. Other folks don't know what qualified charitable distributions are, even though they're the fastest growing type of giving among older donors. And rather than you taking 4 hours to try to explain it, you can create a lesson plan and the lessons for it with ChatGPT. There's a lot of sort of upskilling and teaching that can be really, really good here, right? And teaching is me teaching some members of my team, or just me teaching myself about something new, like the dominoes example. But certainly I think about it with, giving feedback to managers, right? How do I frame this in a way that's really going to land? How do I get someone smart about, how a software company works? Things like that can be very, very useful. All right. A little bit other things on the content side. What can Willy do? We talked about this a little bit. I want to show you a couple of examples here. Donor thank you notes, social media posts, email fundraising calendars, and some other things, but just to give you a sense of what it looks like, right? So tip one, mass personalized thank you notes. So most donors say that thank you is the most important thing they receive, and almost none of you put a lot of effort into thank you notes, right? Or at least none of you are putting more than 10% of your total team's effort into thank you notes. And AI can turn out personalized thank you notes faster that you put them a quick eye on and send out, right? It helps you go way, way sort of beyond this transactional thank you. And you can talk about things like a donor's giving history, impact of previous donations, et cetera. I won't read this, but thank you to a longtime donor, right? Here's an example of someone who's giving to students for the arts. And you can talk about, it can actually be a really warm, thoughtful letter here, right? So won't go through this in depth, but one example, right? And you can also send longer or shorter thank you notes. Really good way to sort of make people feel more cared for. It's just send longer thank you notes. Everyone's going to read every word of a thank you note specifically to them. In terms of social media presence, right? A lot of you have enough time to write one good thing, but not 10 good things. And so it can be really helpful for content tailor-made for LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, or I should say X or Facebook. And so this took about 5 minutes for a particular, a Valentine's Day theme here for an after-school program. And what you can see here is, the right language and the image suggestion. And then if you put that image suggestion in the FX generator that we talked about, you get this, right? So this is an AI created image with AI created language. You might want to put a little, this is photorealistic, right? So in our guidelines, we would say, note, image created with the help of AI. Everyone's, super happy about that. These animals are adorable, even if they never exist in the world, which is pretty wild. Tip 3, talking points and times for tax season. This really goes into the teaching and learning bucket. So when we're going into major donor conversations, we want to be prepared specifically around non-cash giving, which many of you came to our great webinar with Dr. Russell James recently about how much non-cash giving matters to move into higher revenue gifts. And yet most of your gift officers might not be ready for that. And so now we have the talking points specifically for this donor and your organization about this particular type of gift and why it might be better for everybody, right? So that's a really valuable use here as well. This is another example. I won't read all of it because we don't have a ton of time, but as you go through the slides, you can look at some of the examples for what we might talk to a major donor about as we think about how to actually transition them from a cash gift to a more tax-efficient gift. A couple other examples, right? So we can generate high-quality content in a matter of seconds. It's going to free up our time to reach a lot more people, especially for major donors who require levels of engagement, right? Or thank yous for annual fund donors, or in some cases, one of the tactics I really love that a lot of the folks in major giving and plan giving use, especially the more sophisticated organizations, is these birthday cards when people turn 70 and a half. So if you have birthdays, including a year, when someone's turning 70.5. Why does that matter in fundraising? It's because it's the day that you can start giving out of your IRA without huge penalties, and it can be really good. And so you might say, well, I don't really want to write one for everybody, or, this is a great idea, but I don't have time to do that. And so this is for an organization fighting breast cancer, and it's a whole bunch of content around the sort of postcard that you might send for a 70 and a half birthday. And so a lot of content here, all up to date, as you might imagine, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is a really fun way to sort of generate more high touch asks and more information sharing that makes a donor feel really special, but doesn't make you too busy. All right, tip 5. Again, you might be sitting there thinking, wow, the whole year's ahead of us, long year. How do I plan my whole email fundraising calendar? And it's a really good way to say, well, look, we've got a gala in the fall. We've got graduation in June. We're going to go big on Make a Will Month in August. We're going to do whatever, and put all that in, and then spit out a really sort of strong first draft of a calendar. And then it says, okay, this is great, but we want more emails in December and less in November, whatever it may be. And you can try different avenues there. So this is pretty cool. Here's an example of what that looks like for an organization called Feline Rescue. And it just says January, right? And gives you sort of themes, doing roughly every 2 weeks, about 2 a month here. We talk about, sharing the love around Valentine's Day, around Leap Day special. Kitten season apparently is March, which I did not know, springing into action, and so on and so forth, right? So you got your 25th anniversary in April, something for Mother's Day, June 12th, which happens to be my birthday, summer safety tips, et cetera, et cetera. Won't go through the whole thing, but really sort of exciting to see what this looks like. And you might say, this is great, but I want to tweak 2 things. Great, right? You don't need to have a final project, but suddenly what's going to happen here is the work that was going to take you 3 days to come up with this whole calendar takes you about 2 hours. And you're probably having a better outcome, right? This is exactly what we saw in the MIT study of it's happening faster, it's a better outcome, and we're a lot happier doing it because we're not sort of sitting there Googling when is Mother's Day, et cetera. So that can be quite useful. Same thing, right? We'll sort of scroll through the rest of this calendar because, as you might imagine, December tends to be pretty thick. All right, one other thing I wanted to highlight before we wrap up is in all of the FreeWill tools for our partners, because we know there are about a couple hundred partners on the call as well. A little sneak preview of something we're building, because it's always fun to sort of show off what's beneath the hood. This is not live yet, so if you go poking for it, you won't see it right now. But we built this whole sort of advanced Willy version that's going to be specifically designed for each of your organizations. So here, HopeWorks Foundation, you can see sort of all of the attributes of your organization already built in. And then you can easily create thank yous, smart giving messages, direct mails, permanent gift guides, et cetera. So we're super excited about this. This will be in Partner Portal for our partners. We're so pumped about it. We cannot wait to hear all the things you hate about it, all the things you love about it, so we can keep iterating on it. But this is what it looks like, right? So you just sort of have a little conversation with your little AI buddy that's tailored for you, and after a couple of quick questions, it will spit out the full answer, spit out exactly what you need. And then you can always copy it, the little copy button at the bottom, and make sure you do a quick read and then send it off, or make any adjustments that you like. Susan says, is this an additional charge? No, we just built this into the tools. We think it's really important to make people successful. We think you're going to see more AI built into the tools that you already use and love. So there's no additional cost there. All right. We are wrapping up because it's 12:50. We have a bunch of questions, a lot of questions. First things first, my wonderful colleague, Phoebe, as you can see right now, has just posted a link in the chat. And please click that right now. So what is that? That is the survey where, one, you give us a lot of feedback. I hated this part. I love this part. Do better next time. Really useful. We actually, we used to read all the survey results. Now what we do, which is much more efficient, is we actually, I personally do this a lot. People say, what did you think about there's a question of like, what did you think about the webinar? Beyond the ratings, right? 1 through 5. And, probably 500, 600 responses to one of these. So it's a lot to read. We copy the entire sheet. We put in AI and say, please summarize this. And it will say, most people thought it was really good. Some people thought Patrick talks too fast. And there are a couple of really interesting ideas. And it just sort of gives us a full summary, as if we hired an intern to go through everyone and write up a really good memo for it. So it's really helpful. In fact, digesting survey results is one of my favorite uses of AI. So small note. So please do that. We will do that as well. Make a note in the survey if you'd like a chance for the book. Other thing is that sample AI use policy, that will get sent out also. So when you fill out the survey, we will send you a follow-up email. You'll get that. You'll also get that one additional survey. I know this is going to be a little confusing. There's a separate survey that you'll get later today that is the beginning of our donor advised fund research report, where we really study what happened in 2023 versus 2022 and use that to develop best practices for all of you. So we'll report back on all of this in a couple months on what we heard, what we learned, what people saw, what people did creatively to make everybody better at getting donor advised fund grants. So please come check that out. Please do that as well. Okay, in 2 days and 47 hours from now, on February 15th, so everyone gets Valentine's Day without me, and then we're bookending it, at noon Eastern, so same time, same place, we're going to do a short, what we call product showcase on what are called FreeWill feature ships. So FreeWill feature ships are by an enormous amount the most effective way to drive plan gifts in 2024. What does it mean at sort of a top line level? FreeWill, one of the things that we built, is by far the biggest estate planning tool in the United States. And featureships are different ways to be featured in your town, at your state level, in several states, or in the whole country. And those that are at a countrywide level are getting 4 or 5, $10 million in new plan gifts per year. And so it's really cool. So you will be able to, Mary says, please share the invite for featureships. If that invite is in the survey, so just make a little note and we'll send you one. And Rachel says, is it possible to get the recording? Rachel, if you RSVP yes to that, even though you're not coming, you will be able, we'll send you the recording after the fact. So if you can't make it, but you wanted to, RSVP yes to that as well. All right, one last thing, and then we'll answer a couple questions. In 2 weeks, we're going to do a session on how to effectively steward major donors and what's changing about stewardship in 2024. Our donors are changing, the technology we're using is changing, our teams are changing. And so we'll dive in there. We'd love to have you there if that's something that is important to you and your organization. If not, feel free to not come. We won't be mad at you. And then if you need anything, if you have questions, if you want to connect, I'm at patrick@freewill.com. I'm also super easy to find on LinkedIn. I'm still the only Patrick at FreeWill, which is sort of surprising. We're now 200 people. So that is that. So if you haven't already, please fill out the survey. I'm going to answer a few of the questions. We only have a few minutes. Ryan says, thank you. I'll be there. The bi-weekly webinars are so much more beneficial than a $5,000 conference. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. I really, and thank you, William, for all the kind words. Let's, coming back to the questions. Thank you for all your nice things. I'm getting distracted. Good questions. Do we have any thoughts on the environmental impact of using AI? So Ben, this is a good question. So what is the hard part about AI environmentally? It's relatively resource intensive, right? It takes a lot of energy. Now, it takes a lot of energy at an enormous scale, right? So every prompt is relatively low. But in the same way that the internet actually, people sort of think the cloud, all sort of cloud computing takes a lot more energy than is obvious to people. Meaning that Google, you think about, you type into a search engine and the cloud sort of shares stuff, but there's massive data centers across the world, right? Virginia has a bunch, Montana has a bunch, et cetera, et cetera. It's enormous places that require a lot of electricity and water in the same way that, lots of industries do. My sense is that because it's also quite costly to run these over time, you're going to see really strong improvements in the efficiency of them, just because these companies that run AI infrastructure don't want to be spending all of their money on either renewables or non-renewable energy. And so the AI work that these organizations are doing and the sort of content generation is extremely low energy intensive. You're burning more energy by using your laptop, for instance, than you are by making an input into this. But my sense is that's going to get better over time. So, if you're an environmental organization, by the way, and you're an advocacy organization, keep advocating at these AI companies to clean up their act. But generally, it's going to be much lower energy than many of the things you're using. Some really good philosophical questions here. Will AI lead to the loss or decline of our ability to be creative? If we stop practicing creative writing and AI does all the major writing for us, will we ultimately lose our writing skills? This is a really good question. I mean, I think it depends on whether we continue to teach it and practice it. My sense is it could go either direction, right? You just spend less time writing creatively. And for a lot of my career, I was sort of a professional email fundraising writer. I worked for President Obama for a couple of years and did that other organizations where just, spend all day writing one beautiful thing. The thing that made us actually the best is exposure to other people doing really smart things. And so I think a lot of it is if you just sort of read it and and barely scan and send it out? Probably, right? If you sort of also give up on reading, but if suddenly you're exposed to lots of different ways to say something that you might not have done otherwise, especially if you're a little farther in your career, you've gotten into patterns and habits, the ways I certainly did after many years. As long as you're sort of doing deep reading and really using it to sort of expose yourself, the way that if 10 other people were writing as part of a team, you might be a lot better. That's sort of my sense of where it is. But I'll just be guilty of being an optimist, and so I could be wrong here. Albert says, are your chatbots Willie and Sophie running off GPT-4 plus prompt instructions, or have you also used RAG with proprietary documents? I actually don't know what RAG means, so if you want to clarify that, Albert, that'd be great. But basically, it runs with prompt instructions. So there is another way to think about this is there's basically two ways to use AI really efficiently. One is very complicated, and one is only sort of complicated. The very complicated way is to come up with, say, like, here are the 5,000 best fundraising emails ever written. We put them into a giant machine. We try to distill all the learnings, and we only use that to train a future AI model on great fundraising writing. That is not what we did. Instead, what we did is said, look, here are a bunch of important structures for the whole prompt. Now, let the nonprofit user fill in only like 15 or 20 things very quickly that will go into the really well-constructed, tested over time prompt. And by the way, here's a bunch of additional research that academics have done on what makes effective fundraising. Make sure you're following all those best practices. Also make sure we're reducing bias, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of the hard work around that goes in, and you're just sort of doing some plugins, et cetera. Great. Albert clarifies to say, RAG is retrieval. Sorry, help me out. Augmented generation, which grabs additional documents. So not currently. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to pause there because it's 1:01. I would love to hang out with you for another hour and talk about all this stuff, but I have another job, as do you. And so I just want to say big thank you one more time. And for those of you that are available, we'll love to see you Thursday. And for those of you that are available, also, we'll love to see you in 2 weeks, diving in on stewardship, which we'll probably bring a little bit of AI, but not a ton. We'll talk about all this sort of academic research, both in fundraising, but also in sort of general psychology, which I find fascinating about what makes things memorable, what makes things special, what makes things stand out, what motivates more action. And so that will be super fun. And we will see you at the end of February for that. We will see you on Thursday for the session, if you can make it there. And if anything, happy Valentine's Day, happy Black History Month, happy lots more things, happy snow day up in the Northeast. We will be thinking about you as we walk under palm trees in South Florida. But good snow day is always a big adventure. Happy Super Bowl win for the Chiefs. Thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate all of you and look forward to seeing you all soon.